We have some slides. We've got some slides prepared just to give ourselves a little bit of structure to make sure we cover everything, but please, like, seriously put questions in the chat, because like this is really meant to be for the people who are here live, and folks can reference it later, but really it's meant to be a working session for folks. So I'm going to share my screen and make sure I get out of some of these other things here. Wait a second. Here's my pieces. All right. Thumbs up if y'all can see the screen here. So I'll give you just the reason that we're talking about this session, and then Matt and I are both going to introduce ourselves a little bit. So the reason I am here in volunteering time is because 7 years ago, I started a Salesforce consulting company. And at the time, a partner organization came to us and wanted us to work on this project, but they didn't actually want our name on kind of the board. They wanted us to do all the strategic work kind of like behind the scenes. And when we thought, hey, this isn't such a great deal for us as a fledgling consulting company, he was like, well, because you're a lifestyle business. And I was like, so mad. It's like starting a business was hard enough as it is. And then like somebody was like actively trying to tell me that I couldn't do it. And so that kind of became the journey of mine to just really help kind of support other entrepreneurs, both in the consulting and now the app space. I'll give you just a little bit of background for myself, and then I'd love Matt to introduce himself as well. So my kind of going back before my Salesforce days, I started out in investment banking and then moved to running a small business loan fund. So I really care deeply about entrepreneurship and have seen a lot of different sides of entrepreneurship. Then ran my own consulting company for 7 years. And then a couple years ago, I looked over at my husband, who was working on his third company. The first two were venture funded. This third one has been a bootstrapped company and an app called Akunu for pipeline reviews. And I was like, this is amazing. And I can help you tell people about this. So that's when I really kind of joined forces with him and supporting him in kind of getting the word out about this app and talking to customers. It's also given me an inside scoop into what it means to launch an app on the Appexchange. And so when I was helping people kind of launch their consulting businesses, folks like JB and others said like, hey, well, how do we launch an app? I see you're doing this now. And so my theory is always like, learn from somebody who's only a couple steps ahead of you. And so I'm sharing the learnings as we go in terms of an Appexchange. And that's why I'm really happy to have Matt here, who is 5 steps ahead of us in terms of launching an app on the Appexchange and can tell you about his journey.
Yeah, hi everyone. I came into it from a slightly different direction to Megan. I've been on the Salesforce platform since late 2009. Got into it by accident. I just needed a job at the time, and I signed a 3-month contract for a friend of mine who had a Salesforce consultancy. I didn't even know what Salesforce was, other than something that he'd worked on in the past. And signed that 3-month contract, and sort of 12, 13 years later, I'm still on it. But did consulting for a few years. And it got to the point where myself and my business partner, we realized that with consulting, the only way to sort of grow your consulting business is just keep selling more work and more work and more work. And we thought it would be better if we just do the work once and then sell it lots of times. That was kind of the dream. That's not necessarily how things actually work out if you do get a product going, but that's what got us into it. So we started building products on the platform around start of 2013, I believe we launched our first Appexchange listing. We did a few small apps at first, and then we got into doing a much, much bigger thing later in the year, and it's been that one ever since, really. But we learned a lot of lessons quickly in those early days. And Megan said to me, why did I want to do this? And like, she wanted to share her learnings as she goes along, and I want to do it because at the same time, when we were first doing those initial apps and those first listings, there just wasn't much out there. Like we lent on friends that we had in the ecosystem, people we knew who were doing it, had ISV companies and things, and learnt a lot from them. But it was very much sort of one-to-one learning. There was nothing sort of more easily accessible or widely accessible. So I'm just keen to share what we've learned along the way.
Thanks for that. So I want you to come away with this talk with one of just like deep encouragement. So I've been on a lot of different panels for business owners, including like one that was like how to get venture capital for your business. And like so many people went away deflated because they're like, well, wait, my business doesn't fit this model that they're talking about. You know, I don't already have $1 million in revenue or whatever it was. And it was like the wrong kind of platform for the wrong audience in terms of the business. And so what I want you to take away from this is like, there are a million different ways to launch a business. There are a million different ideas. There are a lot of different ways that you can do this. We're going to kind of share some of our experience, but like you can do this. It is possible. It's really hard and it's super rewarding. Kind of starting my own business has been by far the best thing that I've ever done. It's given me confidence in every area of my life. It's also hard, and health benefits cost a lot of money. So like, just, you know that all of those things are true, but there are different ways to start a business and then kind of scale it up. And I will also say that this is one of the biggest misconceptions of starting a business, and especially watching Jeff, who's started 3 product companies now, is like, I used to think that like, oh, you have this great idea and it's just about like executing on this idea. But now I've learned from watching other entrepreneurs that they have like 10 different ideas, and it's about testing all those ideas and then running with the one that has kind of the potential. So I've talked to some folks who are like, oh, I built this really unique thing on Salesforce and I want to market it. But they sometimes get so attached to this technical thing that they've built that when they've gotten feedback that maybe that thing doesn't have as much market traction as they expect, they might be a little bit too attached to kind of that particular idea. So that's what I want to encourage you is like, you can do entrepreneurship and testing your ideas and understanding that you will do things that don't work. And that is absolutely the most important part of being an entrepreneur, is testing things and seeing what works and what doesn't work. So I'm going to have Matt expand on that some more in terms of ideas and how to actually test something.
Sure. Yeah. And lots of things won't work and don't work. And even when you later down the line, we have a product that's out there, we have customers who are doing okay, but there's still like new features, you put them in and sometimes you develop it thinking you've done it the right way, and then you'll find out it's not the right way. And some of these points here now actually tie back to what we do with new features. So we have to treat new features to our products as if they were new products in themselves these days. And we talk to our customers, which is handy to have because we've got those customers. We can talk to them, see what they're actually expecting from them. But if you're coming up with a brand new idea and a new app, it's a good idea to sort of work through this list. As we say, if you could do a mock-up, do a mock-up. I found a lot of people, and this is true, people who have found this in consulting as well, but a lot of people don't really know what they want until they've seen something. Quite often they'll tell you what they want, and you can build exactly what they tell you they want. And once you put it in front of them, they realize that that's not it. And any good consultant knows that's how things go. And good consultants will provide options and help them steer a customer towards the correct solution before you actually implement anything. But often a mock-up can go a really long way. Let someone actually touch something, feel something, or at least just see mock-up screens, see what it's going to look like, explain the processes behind it. And you'll quickly understand whether it's going to fit in with your target audience. So like, you need to consider who you're talking to and who you're going to try and sell to, and try and talk to those people. User groups, especially if you're doing something that's not industry specific and you're doing something on the Appexchange that could benefit any user of Salesforce, it's not tied to industry. User groups are excellent for that because you can get in front of really large audiences quickly. You can attend like a number of user groups in a few weeks and actually reach hundreds of people quite easily. It's actually not that hard to do. And if it's an idea that's going to resonate, you will find a lot of people asking you questions and getting interested really, really quickly. And yeah, if you need help sort of building it and stuff, this consulting engagement to implement as a service, that's something as well that it drove some of our early decisions, one of our early products. And it's like, if you're a Salesforce consultancy, you might find that you're developing a solution for a particular client and realize that it's got legs, it can go further, and it's something you can actually pick up, productize, and then sell on again. And it lets you sort of prove it out and actually try ideas without even cementing it. When you actually make something into a product, it's got to be hardened in so many more ways than a piece of consulting work does. A piece of consulting work is done for one specific environment, whereas a product's going to run in lots of different environments and things and have different users with different needs. You can't always make everyone happy, but with those initial early versions, you could do it for one client, for example, as a consulting gig. And then you could do it for another client's consulting gig and just change a few bits. You could take what you've got, build it again, tweak it accordingly, and then maybe even do a third round. And eventually you then say, right, now we're ready to turn this into a product. And the trial force thing we put in at the end here, if anyone's ever seen like sort of take a demo on the Appexchange kind of thing, that will often spin up a trial force org for you. And other partners have templates configured. And once you register as a partner, you can create template orgs for trial force, which means you set your product up in one environment and you can model it out just using standard configuration, that kind of thing. You know, you can even do your mock-ups in there essentially. And then you can stamp out copies of that org for other people to log in with and play with as trial instances that last 30 days, I believe, off the top of my head. And that's a good way of like making repeatable environments you can give to different people where they, you know, they can put data in, it's safe. There's no sort of cross-contamination between them and things. So it's a good way of getting it out there. But yeah, you really just need to talk to people, see what the excitement's like, see what the engagement's like. There's a lot of companies out there who just make a simple landing page for their product and talk about the features and things and basically have a website that looks like it's for this product, even though the product doesn't exist. And just based on the number of hits and attention they get, that can give them a good gauge on whether it's likely to work or not. If you're going industry specific, you probably already specialize in that area, but you need to talk to companies in that area. Like I say, if you're not industry specific, user groups, I think, are definitely the best way of getting a lot of feedback quickly. The people who tend to attend user groups and administrator groups and developer groups also tend to be quite opinionated, I find, so they can be really handy in getting actionable feedback quickly.
I love that. I've heard that idea before too, to like create a website for something that doesn't exist, or like an ad for something and see if people respond to it. And just,
yeah, you can create a mailing list, get people to put their email address in, and you've got you've got a list of leads straight off the bat then.
Yeah. Sign up for more information. Yeah. Or you might find out that people aren't interested in it, or it's too complex to understand or something. So that's like the other point is too, like, you know, like which ideas to figure, not if. So this is kind of building on that further. One of the things that I have learned kind of transitioning from consulting to the app is that I'm a pretty great salesperson for consulting. I kind of have a consultative approach. I have these one-on-one conversations and, you know, able to kind of have my fill of projects and more, you know, turn them away. But that kind of marketing an app is different. And I think before I kind of saw it from this side, I just assumed that people would browse the Appexchange and find you and then buy you, right? Like I guess I just had that assumption, and that is absolutely not the case. I would say that people find us on the Appexchange, but those are folks who are already looking for us, typically, is kind of the metrics that we're getting. I think there are some exceptions to that, especially if you're an admin focused app. So admins are often browsing, but kind of the business users that are making buying decisions aren't necessarily, they don't even have a trailblazer.me account, you know? And so they might not be kind of browsing the Appexchange. And so just thinking about the marketing aspect, I'm really learning a lot about product marketing. I'm not doing everything right by any stretch of the imagination. You know, I did a demo jam. I was like, no, the leads are going to come. Well, it might have built awareness, but we didn't necessarily get any like real dollar value from it right away. So just thinking really about marketing, just like building a great technical solution isn't necessarily enough. And going back to that business problem and how to craft, like, is it a real pain point for folks, and how are you going to be able to articulate that in beyond the technical features? And then also being able to speak to, like, what are the alternatives of not using your app? Are there kind of off platform Salesforce things, understanding how you relate to those or not, and just where you live as a product. So there's some products that are built 100% native on Salesforce, which is what Akuno for pipeline reviews is. But there's other kind of products that kind of operate with Salesforce or other tools, and those potentially have more use cases with different businesses who are using different CRMs, but maybe aren't as focused. And so those are things to think about in terms of making sure you're understanding kind of marketing, especially that I've thought about.
And then, it comes on to financing it. Well, not financing it, but working out how you're going to make money out of it. As Megan was just saying, an Appexchange listing is not enough. You need a marketing budget for one thing. There's lots of other things you're going to have to pay for, and you need to work out how you're going to cover the cost of that. Of course, that you may have some kind of funding source to start with. You may have some savings. You may have a consulting business putting money into it, but you need to do the maths on what you intend to build, like work out how much you're going to charge for licenses and things. As it says, how many users or organizations are you going to bill per user per month? Or is it the kind of product where it makes more sense to bill per organization per month? There's a lot of options like that to work through. You have to remember that Salesforce take quite a hefty cut out of the money you get as well. It does seem overbearing at first. It definitely seemed overbearing to us at first. I remember it was quite painful, and you won't necessarily get a lot of help from Salesforce in those early days either. But you do kind of have to remember they are providing the platform, and it used to grate on me a bit that they took so much money out of us. But at the same time, now when we go into RFPs with some big retailers and things, and they'll send through spreadsheets to us with 400 odd questions, and 200 of them be about platform security. And when you can type in defer to Salesforce on about 190 out of those 200 questions, I think suddenly it's worth paying them that bit of money. It really does make your life a lot easier in the long run. But you have to factor it in. So you have to work, you're doing per user per month. Are you doing, is it company-wide? Are you going to build annually? How are you going to set that up? And then, look at the market size. Are you only targeting people who are already on platform? Are you looking at an industry that's going to be sort of half on platform, half not? There's different types of partnerships you can get with Salesforce as well. I mean, everyone's heard of ISVs, because if you're on Salesforce, you know that an Appexchange app comes from an ISV, independent software vendor. They also have another partner model called OEM, which is original equipment manufacturer. And people have probably heard that talking about like car parts or buying Windows licenses or something perhaps. But what that means is you can actually, if you set up as an OEM partner, you're no longer necessarily selling to people who are already users of Salesforce. You're building a product on the platform, and you can sell to people who aren't on Salesforce. And your license fee actually includes a platform license as part of it. So you can go to a company that has never had any contact with Salesforce, and you can roll out your product to them, give them an org, everything else, and they never actually have to talk to Salesforce directly to do that. The cut you pay, again, varies, and there's other rules around pricing when you do that. There's a floor price. It says Salesforce, we say here Salesforce take a cut, but they also set a floor price on you, which is the minimum that you can pay to them for any given license. And when that comes into play, then you need to work out if what you can potentially charge your customers will cover both that floor price and give you enough money to do what you need to do and grow the business and to survive. So there's a lot of things to factor in, like the market size again. If you're on platform, if you're doing something for anyone who uses Salesforce, if you could just hit 2 or 3% of the entire Salesforce installed user base, that's potentially a hell of a lot of people and a lot of money coming in. So you've got to look at that. And the last point there, don't underestimate what people will pay. People will pay more money than you think for software, especially when they're already invested in a platform like Salesforce. And if you're providing like tangible benefit, and if you can show ROI, people will pay for it. And going cheap doesn't necessarily work. Our very, very first product that we launched was called Ring My Bell. We originally messed up all these calculations. We decided to charge it $1 per company per year. That was it. You could just buy it for 99 cents and you'd have it for the year. Turns out that wasn't really, much of a benefit. Companies don't care whether they're paying 99 cents or $99. We had one client where the guy still had to raise an internal purchase order to spend 99 cents with us, and it took a couple of days going backwards and forwards. The amount of money they spent actually trying to set that up cost them more than they were going to pay us, which was kind of ridiculous. But we shifted then from that $1 per company per year to $1 per company per month. And then shortly after that, we shifted it from $1 per company per month to $1 per user per month. We then had 2 new clients sort of come on board, bought licenses for all their users, and then they paid us more than the other 400 customers who paid us in total together. So, don't underprice it. It doesn't really help the sales. Obviously, you can't overprice yourself either, but you just have to think about what a license for Salesforce is already costing someone, and how much of a benefit are you providing at the top of that? Like, it's got to be significant enough that you can charge a reasonable amount of money, pay Salesforce their cut, and still grow your business off the back of it.
I thank you for giving that really specific example, Matt, too, because I think this is common both in apps and consulting, is undercharging. I know I did kind of, my former investment banker self did some financial modeling for a friend, and they realized like what they thought they were going to charge, they wouldn't be able to pay the team that they needed to support that many customers based on how much they wanted to learn. So it's good to like just even do rough calculations kind of.
Yeah. And even when it comes to market size, you work out if you're targeting small or big businesses, because big businesses will pay a lot more as well. Some of them don't even notice what they're spending. We had one client for a few years that was paying us $15,000 a year in licenses for a solution. We're pretty sure after the first year, they weren't even using it. The renewal would come around every year, and we actually just kind of stay kind of quiet, and we just slip an invoice over to them via email. And every year, for the first couple of years, they just paid it, no questions asked. Maybe we felt a little bit bad about it, but at the time we needed all the money we could to survive. And clearly they're making enough money, they didn't even notice 15 grand. Like it wasn't an issue to them. They just saw the invoice, they paid it up, and we just sort of stayed. We didn't say, hey, how's it going? We just sort of sent it over to them and stayed kind of quiet. But that kind of helped us in the first couple of years as well, for sure.
And the cost of supporting however many clients versus like the larger clients too is a big deal. Okay.
Yeah, more users in one client require more support, for sure.
Okay, I'm going to have Matt. If y'all know me, I'm not a developer, so I'll have Matt speak to the developer specs that you need to think about, especially when getting your app deployed and developed.
Yeah. So anyone who's been an administrator has done a lot of configuration in Salesforce. You may have deployed things through change sets, things like that. And anyone who's doing consulting has probably done something similar. You may have used more advanced tools potentially to help with clients, and you're used to working with different orgs and different clients. But product development is a whole different ballgame. You're not doing customizations for one specific org. You're building something that has to run in whatever org people want to drop it into, and you have no idea what they're going to do in there. Salesforce do publish a big list of sort of best practices, things like that that'll help you get going. And one of the first steps these days is obviously once you've got something built, you have to go through what's called security reviews. So anything that's on the Appexchange, I think free listings still have to go through these days. I haven't done a free listing in a long, long time, but security review is where Salesforce actively look at the content of the packages that you're trying to list, and they'll make recommendations, and you'll probably go backwards and forwards with them for a long time to get something through, unless it's a very simple application. It can be a pretty laborious process. And cost comes into, again, if you're going to be a paid listing on the Appexchange, the security review will cost you money as well. I think last time I knew it was about $2,700. I don't know if it's changed since then, but that's something else to factor in. But yeah, you have to code with a security first mindset. You have to, if you're writing Apex, you've got to check for field level security, CRUD permissions, everything like that. You're supposed to respect the administrator's whims. If they want to remove access for a profile to an object, you're supposed to respect that. It might blow up your application, but you're still supposed to respect it. Deploying stuff gets very different. Again, you're creating packages and relying on other people installing those packages. There's options for doing push updates. You can push a new release into people's orgs. A lot of clients may not like that. They don't like, especially bigger ones, they have very controlled processes around what gets into production. And if you're trying to change something in their production instance without knowing that, it's not going to go down well. We have a number of clients today who they didn't let us anywhere near production, which can make things tricky. And then our current product takes a few weeks to implement. It's not a simple thing anymore. It's quite big and complicated. But we still have to deal with these situations where we're not allowed in prod. So we have to do everything in sandbox. They have their own pipelines for getting things from one sandbox to another sandbox to UAT environment to prod. There can be any number of tools, stages and tools in operation for each client. Internally, of course, everything gets a little bit simpler. These days, for your own thing, where your main sort of deployment process internally these days should be creating scratch orgs, which are essentially short-lived sandboxes specifically for development. They last up to 30 days. But it's all about getting familiar with DX, which is, everyone's heard of Salesforce DX by now, or most people have their own development space. If you're not a developer, you may not have heard of it yet. It's a command line tool for spinning up scratch orgs and things, but it helps you take the metadata for your app and your source code, and you can keep it in GitHub, another source repository, and everything's done from there. Instead of doing all your development in the development sandbox like you used to, or a developer edition, and then packaging it, everything can be done in DX now. And the second generation packaging is even triggered from that. You do your work in scratch orgs, you pull your code down again, you put it into your source repository. And when it comes to packaging, you take what's on your disk and you turn it into a package from whatever's on your local machine that time. It used to be you put it into a packaging org and package it there. But second generation packaging will take a bit of reading. We're not using it fully yet internally, partly because there's no migration path from Gen 1 to Gen 2 yet for customers. So that means we have to support Gen 1 and Gen 2 if we want to start down the Gen 2 path. But second generation packaging is much, much more flexible, and it's definitely worth getting used to. You have to work out if there's going to be a mobile app component to your solution or not. If it's your first foray into doing ISV stuff, unless it's like an absolute essential thing, I'd probably stay away from mobile applications. Like, rely on customizations and things could be surfaced in the Salesforce app instead. Our product actually revolves entirely around a mobile application and putting a bespoke interface on top of Salesforce essentially for retail. But again, there's even options there, like hybrid. I put hybrid versus native app as one example, but a native app is an app written specifically for iOS or for Android, and looks like a real app, and everything runs actually on the phone. Hybrid apps are ones that actually serve up web content, and that's what we do. We have two very lightweight apps for Android and iOS, but all they really do is surface a web browser essentially that shows our application that's being hosted inside of a Visualforce page. So you can access it via the browser on desktop or via mobile, and it basically looks the same. But again, considering you need a mobile thing, it's a whole other can of worms. And as I said right at the start, package development is different to single org development. You have to do everything from a defensive standpoint. Be careful with things like triggers. Again, that Ring My Bell that I alluded to earlier, the app we did for 99 cents. All that did was, in Salesforce Classic, for anyone who's been around that long, it put a widget in the sidebar, and when somebody closed an opportunity, everyone would get a little cash register thing pop up, and it'll play a noise and tell you who just closed the deal. And it was great for like distributed sales teams. Everyone would see the bell go off and make everyone smile, and they know that somebody's just closed a deal somewhere. The way we initially implemented that wasn't too smart, that we put a trigger on opportunity, which is probably what you're going to do if you want to detect opportunities that have moved to closed one. But being in a package, it makes it a black box for people installing it. They can't, if something blows up in that trigger, there's nothing they can do about it. They can't save it, can't do anything. And sure enough, we did have a bug in there that once a blue moon would pop up and stop that trigger executing. But the side effect of that was that customer then couldn't update any opportunities in their org, which they weren't too happy about. If you're working in one environment, if you're working as an in-house administrator, in-house developer, you'll probably quickly push out a change to that trigger and save the day. But when it's in a package, it's a whole other ballgame where you've got to make that change. You've got to make sure it's going to work for everyone. You've got to get it packaged up. You then got to get the package link over to the client and make sure they install it. And it's a lot harder to debug stuff that's in packages as well. I'm not going to go into that now, but it's, again, clients don't have access to your code when they install the package. But it means they also don't have access to your debug logs, and they have to grant access to say support. You have to log in. It's a bit of palaver, and you can't quickly add more debugging lines to see what's going on either. So yeah, you just got to be prepared to start sort of adjust your mindset a little bit, and like I say, be defensive. Like, you can't really assume anything anymore. You can't just insert an account if you're going to do something like that, because there may be validation rules on there that you're not aware of, things like that. It gets very tricky, but it's all solvable. It's all possible. It's just, you just have to get your head into a different mindset.
Thanks for that. That's definitely.
But I apologize if you can hear the kids screaming in the background. It's dinner time here.
Oh, I appreciate the noises of kids in the background. It shows like we're all real humans with real lives and doing real things. So, appreciate it. So this is something in terms of thinking through both like what your next steps are. I think when you hear about different products that are in the ecosystem, there's some that are like kind of completely new, like, oh, nobody really does this particular thing. This is kind of a new way. I'm, thinking of some of like the new learning enablement platforms, like Speckit is kind of like one of my, like a great company that I know. And that I think about that. And I think there's a couple companies doing that, but it feels like kind of a new way of delivering content where folks are in their apps. And then there's other things that are more iterative, like, Akuna for pipeline reviews is for folks already using Salesforce, potentially already doing pipeline review meetings, and really just like supercharging the analytics that they're able to access at the forefront. So this is where I would just kind of going back to what your business problem you're solving, thinking through that. And this kind of aligns to your business model too. Like, if you're thinking about trying to raise outside capital from the get-go, something that's more iterative may or may not be a good fit for that in terms of other outside investors looking for huge gains. But it may be a good fit for being able to bootstrap that and being able to kind of deploy something based on kind of the cash and the resources that you have. The other thing, Matt mentioned verticals before too. I think particularly like in consulting, I always say, like, if this were my, course on how to start a consulting business, I would say, get specific really quickly, get super specific as quickly as possible, get a niche, focus on that niche, including products within that niche and industry verticals. And so I would think about that from a product perspective too, is, what is kind of the niche? It may be broader. Obviously, the more folks that your product can appeal to, the bigger the market size, but it might be harder to get that awareness out there and get the buyers out there. So I don't know if Matt, you have comments about like how niche-y to get or not niche-y, or
it's
your businesses.
It depends when the industry you want to end up working in. Actually, I mean, our first, like I said, we did 3 small applications early on that were targeted at Salesforce customers, so that anyone who used Salesforce could use those apps essentially. And then our fourth one started off down one path, pivoted, changed direction, but it was always aimed at retailers. And now, it turned into a whole separate business, and that's the business I work for these days. That's Proximity Insight. But we're just very much locked into retail. So I don't think we're ever going to do anything other than retail at this point. But it has far-reaching sort of consequences and things you wouldn't even expect. I mean, everyone knows that retail is seasonal. Even if you're not in retail, you know that there's sales every year after Christmas, for example, and things like that, at least in most Western countries. But there's weird knock-on effects on that. Like, retailers don't want to touch their IT systems prior to the holiday season, and that means some of our customers, they'll go into a sort of code freeze situation around September, October, and then they won't take any more updates until February. But you can't afford to have bugs on something. We have to plan our releases around that, knowing that no one is going to take a release after a certain point in the year and things. So even our internal development cycle now has been skewed purely by the industry that we're in. The holiday season is now our time to pay down tech debt things. We hack new features the first half of the year, wait till they've all stopped taking updates, and then we can sort of bed them in properly and pay down the debt we've built up in that time, if that's the case.
So I think we just have a couple more slides. That was the cash flow question was a good segue into financing 101, Matt, just to talk about how to make the numbers work for a product or an app.
Yeah, again, it can be a very hard topic and something that's easy to overlook, especially early on. I mean, the industry thing even plays a part here as well. Our cash flow cycle for forever has been, again, tied into that retail seasonality in terms of, I said, when they lock down their systems, they don't want to change anything. They also don't want to buy anything in that 6 months. Nearly all our sales as a business happen in Q2, Q3, and then Q4, Q1 go dead. And for the longest time, that's meant we've always had cash flow issues around April. This has always been the worst time of year for us because you suddenly had 6 months no sales. You've had all your money up front, you've kind of burnt through it. Makes it very hard to manage. There's different options for getting going. I mean, pretty much anything to start with has got to be self-funded to a point. You've got to get that prototype up and going. You've got to show that there's a market for it before anyone else would even consider giving you money anyway. So you need some source of funds, whether it's money you've set aside, inherited, whatever, or if you've got a consulting business, you can do it that way. A good friend of mine, co-founder of an ISV called Appexchange, and they have a project management solution on platform called Mission Control, which is a very comprehensive project management suite on Salesforce. Again, they target anyone and everyone who's on platform. It works well for them. But they originally had a consulting business as well, and they did products and consulting side by side for quite a number of years. And to the point where they had not a big team. There was 7 or 8 people in their business, I think, at one point. And then they stopped. At a certain point, they realized they had enough money now coming into the ISP side that they could stop consulting altogether. And at that point, they actually scaled the team back down to just the 2 founders and then went pure product route. I don't know how many people they have on their team now. I think they're somewhere between 10 and 20, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But they've got to that point purely through being self-funded. They've always stayed within their limits. They've only hired once they could afford to hire someone, and they've gradually get up and they've built a very sustainable sort of business on it. Us, on the other hand, we had cash flow problems every year because of the seasonality of the industry we're in. And we knew we were always going to have to get funding. It was the only way we were going to sort of really grow our business and sort of hit our potential. The nature of the product we've built requires a lot of information, and that means it needs integrations. And that's something I urge everyone to think about. Like, if I could start again and do a new product, I'd definitely think about something that doesn't need any integrations to be useful to people. There's a lot of work and maintenance involved in integrations, and it skews who you can target as customers, because suddenly you can't really go for small deals and small businesses because they're typically the ones that don't have any IT capabilities in-house, and they need you to do the integrations. And then who's done in consulting, those integrations are hard work and they take a big chunk of your time. And suddenly you can only sell to bigger customers to actually kind of make any money out of the deal. And that's kind of why we knew we were always going to have to get investment, because we need, a $50,000 deal is kind of borderline for us. We can sort of just about do it, but we're usually not going to make any money out of that for the first 2 years. We're trying to fix that. We're trying to build our own integration platform at the moment just to make things cheaper. Like, there's so many integration platforms out there like MuleSoft, but they'll typically cost you 60, 70 grand a year. So yeah, a 50 grand client isn't going to cut it. So yeah, you can do venture funding, but you need some kind of initial funding. You need to get yourself built to a prototype. You'll then do maybe some kind of seed round. A few years ago, we raised, I think, about $1.5 million, something of that number, and that gave us enough money to get through another 12 months or so and pull on a few more clients. And then recently, back at the start of this year, we closed the Series A round and raised about $9 million. suddenly we're in a new phase. Like I said, every April that we've been having to worry about cash flow. This is the first April we've not had to worry about cash flow, which is kind of nice. Instead, we're just seeing people come on board quickly, and it's a very different model. Like self-funding is very sort of slow and gradual. We were slow and gradual, got a bit of money, get a few more, get more customers. Then we suddenly got a lot of money, and we've had so many hires in the last 3 months now. It's kind of mind blowing. I mean, I had an email today asking to set up 4 new people on our email system and stuff, and we've gone from paying nothing to Google a few years ago for email to now we're up to $600 a month paying Google. So things at that scale, but yeah, it's taken us about 6-7 years to get to this point. We had to pivot, change what we actually changed our entire product, changed what we were doing. But we landed a very big account last year, and it was off the back of that we could then get funding, and hopefully we get more big accounts. We're in this sort of next stage of that. We have to make sure we can keep growing and keep getting the money in. Otherwise, the investors wouldn't be too happy. So that's going to be an alternative. There's the last option here, getting funding against existing contracts. There's lots of different, there's sort of traditional kind of credit. There's loans from banks, things like that. There's companies that will say, oh, you've got a contract for this much for the customer. They'll actually pay you most of that upfront, and then you pay them a small fee. And then when you get the money from the customer, you pay them back, things like that. I mean, again, with the whole cash flow thing, just because you've sold a 20 grand deal to someone, doesn't mean you're going to get 20 grand in the bank the next day. They'll quite often, especially large companies, insist on sort of 60-day payment terms. I mean, you've got to wait 2 months before you actually see any of that money. Then you get that money and you pay a big chunk of it off to Salesforce. So that can be a bit painful. But there's other companies as well that will actually, they're designed to lend money to platform or software as a service businesses. As it says here, ARR, annual recurring revenue, that becomes like your most important metric. And based on how much annual recurring revenue you've got, how much money you're going to get for your licenses every year, people will lend you money based on that. And you can take that and grow your business and pay it back over time. And a lot of them will do the amount that you pay back is based on your recurring revenue and things. And they make sure you're never struggling for cash flow. And they can be really good options. There was one that we talked to quite a few times, and I actually really got to hand on. I've completely forgotten the name of them. The only problem for us is they never really worked out because our business is kind of split. We've got entities, as in business entities in Australia, the US, and the UK, and we have customers all around the world. A lot of those companies focus on one geographic region. Most of them are in the US, which is good news for everyone here because I presume most of you are based in the US. But they would only ever loan us money against our US contracts. And most of our contracts up until last year were in Europe, which meant we could actually not borrow much money from any of these businesses because our ARR in the US was not very big. They wouldn't look at it as a whole group thing. We maybe could have done it in Europe, but Europe's a little bit behind on some of those things. They're not quite so gung-ho about throwing money at businesses in Europe, unfortunately. So it didn't turn out to be an option for us. We kind of always knew we were going for venture, but I think, if I was going to go through it again, I'd either try and go through self-funded or the latter route. But the venture route's exciting. I think there's a lot more on the line. It's a bit more of a gamble for sure, and you have to get to a certain level of success anyway before you can actually get that kind of money into the business. And unless you've got something so new that everybody can immediately see the value of it, and it's got hyper potential, as it says here, it's going to be hard to get any kind of money unless you actually already got significant revenue coming in from your product.
Thank you for that. That was a great overview of all that. And I love the fact that you've done both self-financing and now you've gotten venture folks and AR. So it's like you've actually experienced all the different pieces. So we can stay on and just answer questions for folks, and maybe JB can stop the recording or not if folks want to kind of ask questions privately too. But there is actually a growing set of resources for support. So there's someone who is actually just doing a presentation a bit earlier. If you follow me on LinkedIn, I think I'll try to share that one as well. Mike Davis has started this go-to-market guides specifically from the business perspective, and he has a bunch of articles up. He's also got a Slack channel for folks that have launched apps. So that's really good. There's some technical pieces in there too, but particularly about how to go to market and actually get people to buy your app. if you're kind of coming from the business side and you need the technical support resources, but you really understand the business problem, there are technical groups that will help you build an app, and they're called product development outsourcers. So I just included some names of some that I've heard of. I haven't worked with any of these groups specifically, but I would just like caution you, you know, if you build it, it's not necessarily that folks will come. So just kind of make sure you have that team approach of understanding the business problem and making sure that folks are feeling those pain points. And the Salesforce partner program. So if you even just Google like sign up as a partner on the Appexchange, there's some like ebooks and things like that. I'll share a story, like a consulting partner that I know was like, you know, how do I reach somebody at the Salesforce partner program? And I filled out this form, but I haven't heard anything back. And this other person who's like, works more closely, just like, just sign up. You won't hear from anybody. And so I think this is kind of another misnomer similar to the Appexchange, that you sign up, like Salesforce will like walk with you hand on hand, hand in hand, and lead you down the path. And that's not the case. I mean, they're a huge organization. And so like partnership might not be the right word, especially in the beginning, you're just like a fledgling business. But as you get to a certain revenue level, I know that we got assigned a partner account manager. Banya, if you're listening to this recording, we love you so much. Thank you for all of your support. So I know for Akunu, it's been kind of amazing to have Banya's support.
Banya used to be one of our managers.
Oh, nice.
We get chopped and changed over the years a lot as well.
But so you don't get one of those until you get a certain revenue level for your app. So kind of in the beginning, it's really kind of a resource. And I know Matt's gotten some more intensive support as they've grown as a company, but just know that they do, they have limited resources for the partnerships as well. And so in the beginning, you're kind of on your own a little bit, and just to kind of have that expectation, but it does exist. So I don't know if folks want to ask questions on the record, or if JB you want to stop recording, but I think we'd all love to like just open it up and thank you for showing up, and thank you for like planting the seeds of entrepreneurship. And even if it's 6 months from now or 6 years from now, like know that you can do it, and there's people out there who will support you and help you. So
firstly, thank you, Megan and Matt. This has been an eye-opener. There are many, many things which a beginner wouldn't know about managing the cash flow, looking for the venture capitalist. There are so many things, and this is all very informative. And I'm going to stop the recording now. If anybody wants to talk direct, share any of their experiences, you're welcome.